Okay, so here's the problem. So very first thing, when I hit the 1 key, it's going to try to add this item to the inventory. When it adds the item to the inventory, it's going to go through all this. Eventually, it's going to land on this call on refresh inventory uh, event dispatcher. When it does that, this is where it fires, and then it initializes the inventory down here. So to begin with, when the inventory is constructed, it's going to do the setup event. It's going to verify references. It gets this passed through to it on exposed spawn, tells me whether or not I hit tab to open it or if I'm interacting with another object. Sets these enums appropriately. Sets the current open category to all. And then it comes down here. Because this is true, it's only going to initialize the player inventory stuff. I clear the data, which is just the inventory array and the item array scroll box. I reset the item array scroll box, and then I come to this display category row. And here I actually create the row that has my category buttons. And if I hit resume, you'll see that it goes into here. Then they get constructed. It constructs the row, which the row will go through and do the same thing that the main inventory did. It'll check whether or not the inventory widget is valid, which is the widget blueprint inventory. If so, it'll check whether the player inventory is valid. If both of those are valid, it'll check whether or not it is the player inventory, is only player inventory rather. If not, it'll set up the actor inventory stuff as well. Get the opened inventory type, and then set the opened inventory type. This has to do with switching between the two inventories at runtime. Regardless, after that's done, it'll bind some event dispatchers, and then it'll initialize. When it initializes, it constructs the category buttons. When it does this, it checks again, is it only player inventory? It is true, so it's just going to clear the current panel. It doesn't show anything right now. It's going to clear the current panel of all the category boxes, and it's going to make all the new ones. It's going to, right here, this is where the main problem that I'm getting is, it's going to create it for each index, and it does a total of 9, compensates for it, so it changes this 9 to an 8 basically. And then I create the buttons itself. I pass through a category type, which I get from the index, just right here, and pass that through. Once that's done, it'll set the widget reference array right here. So I resume, and now it's constructing the button itself. When the button is done, it will set up its references just to make sure that it has its appropriate values before it continues. It'll bind some events to event dispatchers, set some other information. It'll clear all of these. Then it'll set them. So it'll just go through if it has an item, it'll set has an item. Then it'll see what the item type is, and it'll go ahead and set those. Then it gets the current open category from the widget blueprint. If it's equal, it'll set the category to open, and it'll change the image to reflect that. So that's everything that happens on when I actually create them. So now that they're created, we set the appropriate widget switcher to show the right inventory panel. We get the current opened category, which was set here to all. And then now we're inside of display items in category. We get the category. We check if the category has an item, which is checked here. It gets the category row widget reference, which was set up when we created it. And then it gets the individual button references, which were set up when we created the row widget. And then it'll get the specific Boolean from each one to see if it has an item. If it does, it passes it through to the select node and returns it as a Boolean. This is where I'm having the problem. These button reference nodes are returning as invalid some of the times. Specifically, when I add an item to the inventory after closing it and opening it one time, which I'll show you in a second. So it does that. Now it's going to go to this switch because it has an item. So if I resume, it goes to that switch and then it'll display the item. It's in the all category right now, so it's just going to clear the panel and for each item that is that type, and it's just going to create the inventory row. Now if I resume, I'm going to be in the game. I have my item. I can switch between panels, no problem. I close the inventory. I open the inventory. Actually, so I open the inventory. It succeeds correctly the first time. If I add an item to the inventory after opening it the first time, it'll call event refresh inventory, which will initialize the inventory, which will check if it's only the player inventory, which it is. So it initializes only player inventory, which brings it down here. And again, does all the stuff that I explained earlier. And my monitors are going crazy right now. It's going to display the category row again. It's going to create these, and notice when it creates them, it's actually going to stop on the construct breakpoints inside each of the individual things, which allows it to set up the references correctly. Then it's going to go through here. Because the references are valid inside of here, it's going to go to this switch, which it does, and it adds up correctly. If I close it, open it back up, skip through all these breakpoints, if I hit the 1 key to add the item to the inventory, it's going to refresh the inventory, bring it right back down to this category row. Now it should stop on the breakpoints inside of the constructs, except it doesn't. It proceeds right through to try to display them. And so it's going to check if the category has an item, which if we check this, the row's valid, this button is not valid. So it's going to return as false. So that's going to try to switch the current open category, which bring it to here. Category is all. The current category is all, so it should do absolutely nothing. Except it brings it right back up here to event refresh inventory. Shouldn't do that. Now if I go through and keep pushing this, resume, it'll display the category row again. Now it constructs the row and the button correctly. Then it'll go through and it'll actually display the items. No problem. Notice the hello print string up there. Now the really weird thing is that if I keep on pushing the 1 key, it doesn't keep happening. It only happens the first time. Sometimes it'll happen a bunch of times in a row. Sometimes it happens once. And I don't know why it's doing that. So like now it's working every single time to add an item. But if that was from the print string. If I stop and play it again, skip past all these, close, open, skip past all these, skip past all these. Notice it had to go through twice. If I do it again, it goes through twice. If I do it again, it goes through twice. Eventually, it'll get to the point to where it'll stop going through twice, like it did. Actually, it didn't do it just there. Like it did now. So after 5 times, it finally did it correctly the first time. And I don't know why it's doing that.